How's it going, everybody? I'm Andrew Robson, and you are watching RAKUYO's Deciduous Bonsai channel. On today's episode, we are going to work on this Deciduous Japanese maple that I bought from Telperion Farms, and I'm going to talk about the issue, yes, I said issue, on why deciduous bonsai tend not to get names. What's up with that? We're going to talk about it as I trim back this Deciduous Japanese maple. Now, I'm going to trim back this Japanese maple to its first pair because last time I worked on this tree, I wired almost every single branch. So to get some nice variation of movement built into this tree, I'm going to trim it back to its first pair, do a cut cycle because last time I worked on it, it had a very strong wire cycle. So now I'm going to walk around. We're going to trim this back to its first pair everywhere, so that next year we can bifurcate with a minimal amount of straightness. And while I'm doing that, let's talk about what's up with deciduous bonsai not getting names. Now, let me talk about the precedent. Let's set the context here. If you look at bonsai in Japan, there are many famous bonsai, both famous conifers and famous deciduous. But the famous conifers tend to get names like smoke rising out of the volcano or ascending dragon coming off, some forest, or I don't know. They have these nice poetic names with really fun meaning. And you see this on so many conifer bonsai that it makes you wonder, well, why aren't they naming the deciduous bonsai also? All of us deciduous lovers were like, what's going on with that? I don't like it. So, here's my suspicion. I haven't heard anybody ever talk about this, but we're going to give it a shot. We're going to give it a crack. My suspicion is that deciduous bonsai don't get named because they're not very unique. Deciduous bonsai in Japan are, my teacher Michael Hagedorn said this once in a podcast, it's almost like they are working off the same artist statement. And you just... another way of saying that is they're creating deciduous that tend to look very similar. If you have a Chinese quince, that assumes you're going to have a large, massive trunk bonsai with nice meaty branches. If you have a trident maple, that assumes you're going to have a nice delicate forest or a big powerful trunk or a root over rock. If you have a stewartia, that assumes that you're going to have a nice graceful tree with nice slender movement and the branches are all going to be very upright. If you have a Japanese maple, it's going to be Miyogi style, informal upright, have a nice exaggerated taper and a nice exaggerated nabari. If you have a Zelkova, it's going to be broom style. It's going to look like that classic lollipop kind of shape. And it's going to be a nice little umbrella. All of those things are standard. And if we study bonsai in Japan, you see these species in the deciduous world that are treated very similarly. And it's not that you don't see a Zelkova that's not a broom, but 99% of the Zelkovas that you see are going to be a broom. It's not that you don't see a Japanese maple cascade. That happens sometimes, and it's really cool when it happens. It's that most of them are going to be that informal upright Miyogi style. So what's up with the fact of deciduous bonsai not getting names? Well, I think it has a lot to do with these styles. The trees that get names in Japan are trees that are very unique. Think about a Yamadori juniper. One of the most famous Yamadori junipers in Japan is a tree that's no longer alive, but it's an old Itoigawa that was named Smoke Rising Out of Volcano. And that tree, it looks like such an abstract piece of art that, no artist would ever intentionally manufacture. It's just a really wild tree. And because it's so imaginative, so playful, so luxurious in its avant-garde design, that's why I think someone was so inspired to give it a name. And we just don't see a lot of deciduous bonsai in Japan that look like Yamadori kind of dreamy fairy tale kind of forms. You don't see it because, like we said, those deciduous bonsai that we see in Japan, they tend to be more working off a similar artist statement, like my teacher Michael said. And when I started getting all these trees from Telperion, this was before and after the fire. Here at RAKUYO, we have about 75 bonsai from Telperion Farms. And I would say about half of those I got before the big fire and half of them were salvaged after the fire. And so the thing that's really fun about those trees that I salvaged and got before the fire were, you know, they look like this. They look like this Japanese maple. It's funky. It's not that same informal upright myogi that you would see that has very kind of similar lines and shapes and whatnot. This has beautiful taper. And so this tree's got nice taper, but if you look, it has this super sharp bend here that, you know, this would be too much if we were ever going to create it and critique it. But this sharp bend here, you know, it's now part of this tree. This tree is old because of it. And I'm excited about this tree. I really think this is going to be a very special Japanese maple because it is different than that artist statement that we would see if this was a Japanese maple being created in Japan. And so I'm really interested with so many of these unique trees with, you know, tons of character that I have from Telperion Farms that don't kind of play by that traditional playbook. And the thing that I'm so fascinated about is what happens if we take this very unusual but old starting point and we do 30 years or 20 years or even 15 years of traditional branch work. What if I took that traditional model of building nice, beautiful branches, but did it on a very unconventional trunk? That's what I'm excited about with so many of my Telperion trees, is doing this traditional technique on a non-traditional starting point and seeing what happens. You know, maybe this is going to be an experiment that doesn't work out, but I have a strong suspicion that doing that traditional work on a non-traditional starting point is going to make a tree that maybe deserves a name. Maybe, you know, if there aren't deciduous trees that should be named in Japan, maybe we need to create some over here. That's what we're doing here at RAKUYO. We're taking this deciduous model of bonsai and we're applying it in ways that are pushing boundaries and evolving the art. So I'm really excited to play with that here at RAKUYO. We're definitely playing with it with this tree and so many other trees that I have from Telperion Farms because, you know, just because it's different, you know, doesn't mean that we can't have some fun. And I want to embrace the difference that this tree has and really run with it and explore it and embrace it. So we got this tree all trimmed up. I'm super pumped about this tree. Now, don't anyone give me, you know, suggestions for names in the comments. This tree still needs, you know, 10 years of branch work before we want to give it a name. If this does end up being a beautifully refined tree, which is that's what we do here at RAKUYO, once we get it to a beautiful refined tree, I think this tree is going to be so unique and full of character that it might warrant a name one day. I think we should start naming deciduous trees a little bit more. I'd love to know why they don't do it in Japan. If you have any insight to that, feel free to drop us a note in the comments. And I hope you like this video. Consider subscribing to the channel, which really helps us out to spread this wonderful deciduous love and excitement all across the YouTube platform for people to learn deciduous bonsai art. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Andrew Robson, and this has been RAKUYO's Deciduous Bonsai channel.